The people that inspire me more than anybody else are my own patients. And I'm always learning from them. And I think the day we stop learning as doctors is the day we stop actually becoming proper doctors. So I think that we need to approach a lot of this, there's a lot of evolving science, but we need to constantly have an open mind. The man who's considered the father of the evidence-based medicine movement, Professor David Sackett, said, half of what you learn in medical school will show to be either dead wrong or out of date within 5 years of your graduation. The trouble is nobody can tell you which half. The most important thing to learn is how to learn on your own. Sadly, I've been a qualified doctor now for almost 17 years. I have slowly and reluctantly come to the conclusion that as it stands now, honest doctors can no longer practice honest medicine. We have a complete healthcare system failure and an epidemic of misinformed doctors and misinformed and harmed patients based upon a number of factors. Biased funding of research, so that's research that's funded because it's likely to be profitable, not beneficial for patients. Biased reporting in medical journals, biased patient pamphlets, biased reporting in the media, commercial conflicts of interest, and last but not least, medical curricula that fail to teach doctors how to comprehend and communicate health statistics. So many doctors, surprisingly, don't understand health statistics and therefore cannot evaluate evidence for and against a treatment. So there are many ways of actually presenting a benefit, a relative risk or absolute risk, also known as the numbers needed to treat NNT. So if you communicate relative risks, as opposed to NNT or absolute risk, it can actually lead lay people to, and doctors also, to overestimate the benefits of a treatment. A third of articles, in fact, published in the BMJ, JAMA and the Lancet use mismatched framing when presenting information on the benefits of a drug and the harms. It's extraordinary. This is not science. This is marketing. The man considered probably the world-leading researcher in health literacy in Berlin, Gerd Gigerenzer, he said in a World Health Organization bulletin in 2009, it is an ethical imperative that every doctor and patient understand the difference between absolute and relative risks to protect patients against unnecessary anxiety and manipulation. Unless you have this conversation with a patient, unless your doctor tells you the absolute benefit of a drug you're going to take, then it's not being ethical. I think this is unethical practice. That's essentially what Gerd Gigerenzer is saying. But we are unwittingly practicing unethical medicine. Most doctors want to do the right thing, but they're misinformed. Peter Wilmshurst, who's a cardiologist, a very respected cardiologist in the UK, in the Centre of Evidence-Based Medicine in 2014, giving a talk, he points out a few, I think, really important points. First of all, pharmaceutical companies and medical device companies have a legal obligation to make profit and declare a shareholder dividend by selling their product. They are not required, although we would believe it to be the case or hope it to be the case, they are not required to sell consumers, patients and doctors the best treatment. But what he says is the real scandals are this. Regulators fail to prevent misconduct by industry, and doctors, institutions and journals that have responsibilities to patients and scientific integrity collude with industry for financial gain. The former editor of the New England Journal of Medicine says it's no longer possible to trust, this is the highest impact medical journal in the world by the way, says it is no longer possible to trust much of the clinical research that is published or rely on the judgment of trusted physicians or authorities of medical guidelines. I take no pleasure in this conclusion, which I reach slowly and reluctantly over my 2 decades as an editor of the New England Journal of Medicine. That's quite extraordinary. Is she alone as a journal editor? No, she's not. Richard Horton wrote an editorial in 2016, and he said possibly half, according to people that he'd met, senior academics who he said will remain anonymous, possibly half of the published literature may simply be untrue. Peter Gosha, co-founder of the Cochrane Collaboration, who's done a lot of work in this area around research misconduct, scientific integrity, he wrote a piece in the BMJ not so long ago, he's written a book about this, is actually one of the other issues is the fact that there is a lot of problems of major pharmaceutical companies being found guilty for fraud essentially. In the United States in particular, between 2009 and 2014, there was a total of around $14 billion worth of fines paid for illegal marketing of drugs, hiding data on harms, which involved the majority of the top 10 pharmaceutical companies. But the problem is this, is that there is no incentive for them to stop doing this. There doesn't seem to be anything changing the system. And what he says is that if you commit crime and crime pays, you commit more crime. And that's what they are doing. I would argue this is an attack on democracy. This is an attack on the principles of democracy. People making everyday decisions on misinformation, on half-truths, that they would change their decision-making process if they were given the full information.